Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining us again today. Well, I've got another pistol video for you here today, and this is one that for many of you, this is a firearm that's already very familiar. Of course, we're talking about the Glock 19, a pistol known by a lot of people in the gun world. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Are you seriously fixing to have another Glock 19 video? Well, hear me out. Believe it or not, a lot of people have been requesting, although there's thousands of videos done by some very good people with a lot of technical knowledge, you can find out as much as you've ever wanted to know about the Glock 19. But we've had people request that we cover it here on the channel. And the question that comes up is, what is it about the Glock 19 that after over 30 years makes it still one of the most popular and best-selling handguns in the world? Does it still have a viable place in the market of concealed carry with all these, smaller, high-capacity pistols that have revolutionized, concealed carry? Does it still have a place? Well, we're going to answer those questions. We're going to talk about what is it about the Glock 19 that makes it good, things that can do better. We're going to get into all that and a whole lot more in just a minute. All right, once again, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and you just haven't had a chance to do so until now, if you could do me a favor and just locate that little subscribe button in the lower right-hand portion of your computer screen there. If you could hit the like button. If you're on a mobile device, you can scroll down below the video and hit the subscribe button, and then you can hit the bell icon. It'll let you know whenever we do something new. It helps us out a lot, and we really appreciate it. So, today, it's the Glock 19. For the purpose of this conversation, it's going to be the Gen 4. And we'll cover some of the differences as this gun's developed over time, but I'm going to try not to bore you with too much history that's not directly relevant to this gun. But in order to talk about the Glock 19, we do have to talk a little bit about history so it'll make sense. And so the first thing we're going to do, which is something we typically do here, is I like to give you a bit of scale. Now, I find myself in a little bit of a bind here because I very commonly use the Glock 19 as a standard by which to compare other guns. Now, since we're looking at the standard, well, I guess what makes the most sense is let's just take a quick look at the dimensions on the Glock 19. And if you look at it, you'll see that it has a 6 3/4 inch length on the slide. And if you look at the height from the top of the slide to the bottom of the magazine, it's about 4 7/8. Taking the firearm and looking from the top, you can see that the slide is right at 1 inch thick. And of course, it's a little bit thicker across the grip. It's more of 1 1/16 across the grip. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because there are many of you that may already conceal carry, but you carry different types of guns. For example, there's probably revolver people here on the channel. I very commonly carry a revolver myself. And if you carry like a 2-inch revolver, well, there's just some scale. That's how much smaller your little 2-inch revolver is going to be compared to a Glock 19. And I think that's relevant. Kind of helps you understand what you're looking at if you consider a firearm like this. Along the same lines, you may have one of the more modern, higher capacity guns like this Sig Sauer P365. This is the X Romeo Zero. Nice little gun, but as you can see, it also is dwarfed by the Glock 19. So I just wanted you to get a little bit of scale there as we're going through here. So in order to talk about the Glock 19, we have to talk a little bit about the gun that came before it, which is the Glock 17. And just to make a long story short, there are a lot of people looking to replace some of their older guns, whether it was 1911s here or whether it was, older SIGs, older Walthers. There's all kinds of guns out there that people are just looking to get a better, modern, something that would work better. And specifically, the Austrian Armed Forces was looking for a pistol that had to meet very specific guidelines. It had to be self-loading, had to be able to load the magazine without using anything to help. It had to be able to fall from a certain height, and not fire or be damaged. All these different things they had to do. And the answer was, and this is from a company, Glock didn't have firearms manufacturing experience, but they did have polymers experience. And what they actually ended up with that was the winning firearm was this, the Glock 17. Now the Glock 17 is, obviously a larger handgun. Just to briefly look at it, you can see that comparing what we looked at a while ago, it's got a much bigger slide. It's about 7 1/4, and it's over 5 1/4 inches from the top of the slide to the bottom of the magazine there. And other dimensions are kind of similar, but if you look at it, it's a little bit wider overall, just slightly, but the slide is about the same. It's about a 1-inch dimension on the slide. Now, I did this just to say, when the original version came out, it was extremely popular, and before you know it, they've been sold. By 1992, they had sold about 350,000 of these, and a 250,000 of those were in the U.S. But the desire for a smaller version was always there, and so Glock answered the call in 1988 with the Glock 19. Now, Glock 19 has gone through several different changes over the years. Originally it had a much duller grip that did not have near as much, didn't have this kind of texturing. As they went through time, the second generation, they had added a little bit of checkering to the front. By third generation, they had added an accessory rail and loaded chamber indicator. By the fourth generation, you had your changeable back straps and reversible magazine release. And of course, the Gen 5, they've added some front serrations, slightly different trigger, and a flared mag well. The reason why I'm using the Gen 4 is because I believe it's, out of everything they offer, I think the Gen 4 is a pretty good balance of everything that Glock has to offer in a pistol. So that's your basic historical overview on the Glock 19. So let's talk about the features. So if you look at the Glock 19, we're going to talk about various features here, and this is going to be in no particular order. We're going to go into a quick safety check here. I'm going to pull the magazine out. You can see it's empty, and you can look and see all the way through that we have nothing in here. You can see the feed ramp, so there's no rounds in the gun, and there's nothing in the magazine. So let's talk about the features here. So Glock 19, all right, obviously this is a striker-fired semi-automatic handgun, chambered in 9mm, and it has standard 15-round capacity plus 1 in a chamber for a total of 16 rounds. Now, like with many Glock pistols, you can use magazines from the same type of handgun. Like you could take a 17-round magazine from a Glock 17 and stick it right in this firearm, and it would simply stick out a little bit more. And of course, they make extended magazines, and there's people who like to do that, keep a longer magazine as a spare, as a concealed carry, the backup for that, whatever. So that is an interesting feature that you have with the Glocks. Looking at this, now the sights on this one are a little bit different because I always change them. There's only one that maybe one or two I haven't changed on. I haven't had a chance to yet. For example, this is a Glock 35 right here. It's a little 40 caliber long slide, but if you look down the sights, this is what a typical Glock sight picture looks like from the factory. You got your little white U and then your little white dots. That's a standard Glock sight, and there's nothing wrong with a standard Glock sight. But I'm a fan of having as high visibility sights as I can. These are TrueGlow TFOs. So they're fiber optic and tritium, so they're extremely bright and easy to pick up in the daytime, and they're bright at night. So that's what I tend to use. It's very easy. Glock, one thing about Glock, because it's been around so long, You know, when you've been making a handgun for over 30 years and it's one of the best-selling handguns in the world, one of the advantages is there's tons of stuff that you can get to customize your Glock. So sights, you can pretty much get whatever makes you happy. On the Gen 4, you have these rear serrations. As I said, if you had a Gen 5, you'd have some on the front here. That doesn't really make a whole lot of difference to me because, you know, typically if I'm holding the firearm in the gripped hand, I'm going to be manipulating the slide with the opposite hand anyway, so the rear serrations work well. You do have an accessory rail here on the front, so if you are the type of individual that likes to have either a light or a laser on your handgun, either as a concealed carry weapon or as a home defense weapon, you can do that. It's a pretty good size trigger guard. It's not the biggest of these type of guns, but it is big enough to allow for a glove, which is important to me. When I'm on the property or from hunting, doing different things, and it's cold, I'll have gloves and I will have a firearm in a cross draw or something, and I want to feel confident about being able to get a gloved finger inside the trigger guard without, you know, having any complications. You've got your magazine release here on the side. Like I said, you manipulate that, it comes right out. It is reversible, so if you're a lefty and you want to set that up the other way, you can certainly do that. This is your slide, lock, and release. Doesn't stick out very far. These can be changed out as well if you want something that's either bigger or hardly visible at all. That can be changed. The Gen 4s feature these changeable back straps, and that makes a difference in a lot of cases because of different size hands. I myself have a larger hand, and if I had the small back strap on this firearm, my fingers would come around a lot further, and it's a whole different feel on the weapon versus the right size back strap where my fingers feel like they're where they belong. And the other part of that is that you need to be able to get the meat of the other hand in the right location. Depends on what kind of grip style you use, but when I hold my firearm, I kind of need a place for this other hand to go. And having the right back strap creates the right amount of spacing for my hand when I hold the firearm. So that is good to have. Now, one thing about Glock is they advertise their safety system because they do things a little bit different. They call it the safe action system, and basically that's a few things that make that up. You see here you've got this little tab on the trigger, so it's kind of like a piece you have to pull. You see it moving there before you get to the trigger. Okay, well, there's three components they're safe to have. So there's that, and then on the inside of the weapon mechanically they've got a firing pin safety and a drop safety, and all these they automatically reset themselves and prevent the gun from being able to be fired unless you are properly manipulating the trigger like you're supposed to. So the gun cannot just be dropped and fired, and that is a very good thing about the Glock. Now, once again, if you look at the weapon here, going back to the trigger, you can have all kinds of high-end handguns that have, you know, super low trigger weights and custom travel and things of that nature. You can have all kinds of the best detail. So a Glock trigger, I'm going to reset this and let you see it. That's not really bad as far as your reset on that trigger. I've got pistols that have much better resets, but they're also extremely high-end guns. But what you have to remember, most people that trigger reset and the travel, those kinds of things are not important to everybody. They're small things that you'll notice if you do a lot of shooting and you're really, really proficient with your handguns, or if you're just picky and you like a certain feel. But for the type of gun that we're talking about, it's extremely real, you know, it's consistent. I can count on that trigger pull feeling the same every time, and I can count on that trigger reset being the same every time. So it's just really nice that you can have a firearm that is that good as far as things being the same all the time. A pistol like this weighs, you know, right at 2 pounds empty, and so it's heavy, but it's not too heavy, and it's got a little over 4-inch barrel. That'll contribute to its shooting characteristics, which we'll get to in a minute. But that's your basic feature set for the Glock 19. All right, well, let's talk about the range. So, a firearm, in order for it to be extremely popular, obviously there's got to be more to it than just being, durable and, easy to work with. In the case of a weapon like this, the Glock pistols are all very easy to work on. If you look here, you can see that for something like this, the disassembly is very easy. You pull a couple tabs down and you have the slide off of the weapon there. And then, you've got your spring assembly and your barrel that just tip right out, and you can just slide back onto the frame. This ability to disassemble the weapon and clean it and get it back in service is one of those things that, of course, makes it really, really great for both military, law enforcement, personal use, concealed carry, what have you, because Glocks will run under a lot of odd circumstances anyway, which we'll get to in a minute. But knowing that you can go in there and take the gun apart and clean it very easily, that's kind of nice. But at the range, I remember the very first time I shot a Glock. And for me, the very first Glock I ever shot actually was not a Glock 19. My first Glock was a Glock 30, which is a kind of a shorter, fatter Glock, and it's a 45 ACP. And I bought that because I was a big 45 caliber guy and I wanted to get a Glock and see what they were like. And I have to give credit where credit's due. From the very first time I shot my Glock 30 and 45 caliber, it was a very good shooting gun, and it didn't take very many rounds for me to start producing very respectable groups at the range. Now, when I got my hands on a Glock 19 for the first time, well, I just assumed that I was just horrible at shooting the Glock 30 because of how much better this firearm was going to perform. Now, you got to remember there's a lot going on there. This is a 9mm cartridge. You've got a 4-inch barrel. You've got a pretty good size frame. There's a controllable amount of weight. The firearm manages the recoil very well. So accuracy with the Glock 19 is very easy to achieve, even from new shooters. Matter of fact, there are many people that I work with that are people who are trying to get their concealed carry license, or they're people who are, wanting to be trained on how to use firearms for the first time. And one of the weapons that's a go-to is the Glock 19, because even people that are leery about using other firearms and think they're too complicated, they can usually pick up a Glock 19 and do very well. As a matter of fact, many people will go to the Glock 19 to qualify for concealed carry, even if they plan on carrying a different firearm, just because it's a very easy platform to shoot. So as expected, I didn't have any problems at all. Now, I took this particular Glock 19 back to the range just to abuse it as much as I possibly could, so I could come back and talk to you about how ridiculously reliable the weapon is. So, as far as range ammo, I had some of my old favorites. I had some PMC and some SMB, and the SMB is this ammo here. It's pretty good. It shoots pretty clean. I like it a lot. So as far as your range ammo goes, I've got that, and I run a host of different hollow points. I kind of like the Sig Sauer V-Crown, mainly because it's reasonably priced compared to other defensive ammo that I buy, and I hadn't had any problems with it. Got some of the Barnes that has been pretty good. I've got some Critical Duty. Now, I've shot all of these rounds, lots and lots of these rounds, through the Glock 19. I've even mixed these rounds in the magazines just to see what kind of crazy results I could get. And there pretty much hasn't ever been a time I've shot my Glock 19. And I have more than one. This is a weapon that to me it's kind of like a 9/16 wrench. I can't imagine just having one of them in my toolbox. So I have more than one, but this is the one I use the most often, and that's why it's a little more scratched up and beat up, because this one has seen a lot of life. But extremely well performing at the range. I shoot from about 21 feet, and you'll hear me say that in other videos. That's my defensive range that I practice within. And I can take this gun after not picking it up for a year, and I can punch a 1-inch hole in the paper all day long and feel pretty good about myself. That's just how good this firearm is. And once again, you know, people who've never shot the firearm before in their life can come along, they can pick it up, and they can produce those same kind of results without a whole lot of effort. About the only people that I've seen that were not big fans of the Glock, a lot of times it's going to be people that are used to shooting 1911s. And the big problem, of course, there is that a 1911 has a different grip angle. It has, you know, a different trigger, different feel, everything about a 1911. And 1911s are, I've got several myself. They're nice guns. They're very, if you have good ones, they're very precise for really serious shooting. And sometimes people making that transition don't like the feel of the trigger and of a gun like this. But make no mistake, it's a very good shooting gun. It's very easy to get the gun shooting well. And the results are duplicatable by virtually anybody. So what's it like to carry the Glock 19? Well, I have carried the Glock 19 a lot. And in addition to the Glock 19, there's a 40 caliber version of this gun called the Glock 23. Between the 23 and the 19, I've probably carried that gun. There's a several year stretch where that was the only thing I carried, probably 4 or 5 years. Just continuously, even with other smaller guns I had available, just because it was so easy to carry if you have the right kind of holster. And I'll give you an example of what the right holster is. Now, for most cases, if I'm talking about carrying a gun like this, you've seen me talk about sticky holsters before, you know, stuff that goes inside the waistband with no retention. I've done that, but that's not really my preference on something this size because it's just too big. And you'll hear me say that for something like a sticky, it needs to be a gun small enough that I would put it in my pocket. If it's small enough for me to pocket it inside a sticky, it's also something I think is light enough to go in the waistband without retention. But having said that, I've got several of these little crossbreed Super Tucks. And one thing I like about these is, you know, it's leather and Kydex goes right in. It's very solid. You've got plenty of retention. You can see I have this marked for all my Glocks. I've got many of these for different weapons, so this is the only way I can actually keep up with which ones are for which. So I have to excuse my chicken scratch on there. But I carry with this, and you can see by how worn out this particular holster is, you know, just how much time that I've spent carrying it. Super comfortable, you know, this leather, super comfortable. You've got other options that I've used quite a bit. One of those, now of course that holster was inside the waistband, but if you're going outside the waistband, this little Black Hawk is one of my all-time favorites as well. And this one, once you go in, you do have some retention here. You've got a release tab right here that lets you get the weapon out. But this is a really good holster. And if you're, you know, dressing a little bit heavier, let's say that it's, you know, wintertime, and you have more layers. I've done it in the summer too, but it's much easier in the winter where I'm wearing, you know, heavier pants, an inner shirt, maybe an outer shirt. So there's plenty of clothing to keep from printing. And if it's on the outside, of course, you need a little bit more since you don't have the waistband covering this part of the gun. But using either something like the Crossbreed, I've also got an Alienware that's made kind of like that Super Tuck that's really good. Great holsters as well. There's tons of them, guys, you know, Galco. So many people make them, you know what I mean. But between something like that and something like this, I can carry this firearm around all day long, and it doesn't really feel like I'm carrying a large firearm. It just doesn't. Now, of course, if you compare it to something tiny like a little SIG 365 or a 2-inch revolver, well, sure, you're going to know the difference because, they're not even in the same category of size when it comes to firearms. But the Glock 19 can be carried very comfortably all day long. I've done it. I've done it many, many times. And with the right holster, once that holster's broke in, you can have a good retention holster and know that you have a very capable firearm with good capacity and good controllability on you at all times. So, is it still a good option for concealed carry? Well, as far as being comfortable, I'd say it's not out of the game. The big three things that I rate a firearm are on accuracy, reliability, and comfort. And comfort is one of the most important ones because if the gun's not comfortable, if you don't, if it's so big and so awkward that you don't feel like that you would carry it, then if you leave it at home, it's not doing you any good. So comfort does matter. So to me, the Glock 19 is still a weapon that can be carried comfortably on the body if you have the right holster. So overall impressions of the Glock 19. Well, like I said, we covered a lot of material here, and we know that this firearm's overgone some changes over time. But it's fundamentally very much, like it was. It's had a few things that have changed on it that are things that, were needed. Accessory rail and grip, reversible magazine release, improvements to the trigger, serrations on the slide, things of that nature. These are all things that have come along that have made the Glock 19 even better and more relevant. And you got to give props to Glock. They try to think of everything. I also happen to have a Glock 19. This is the MOS. And if you're one of these individuals that likes to have, a red dot optic on your firearm, well, Glock has an answer for that, and their answer was the Glock 19 MOS. Now, this one is outfitted with a Viper. This is made by Vortex, and it's a pretty good little optic there. You can see the red dot, and this was the first optic like this that I bought, and it wasn't very expensive, but they're extremely durable. And Vortex, the company that makes these, has got an outstanding warranty. Basically, you can just pretty much destroy the optic, and within reason, they're going to take care of it for you. I've had very good luck with Vortex, and so I'm going to continue to run this optic on this pistol for sure. But as you can see, they just made some changes to the slide here to accommodate the optics. It's still based on the same handgun, and if you wanted to be a regular handgun, you just cannot put that on there. But as you can see, they're always trying to think of ways to answer the call of what people are looking for. And that's one reason why Glock has been able to stay relevant, after all this time in that market. And the other thing is, when you have something like this, the way it's designed, well, adding the optic to the firearm doesn't change its ability to go right in the same holster. So if you're using something like the Black Hawk, or if you're using something like the Alienware or the Crossbreed, and you want to have the optics version of that, you can go right in the same holster. That's one good thing about Glock, is that if you have their products, you can generally find a way to make it work in a lot of situations, and there's so much aftermarket support. So, one of the questions that we started off with here is, talking about relevancy. There's a lot of small guns. Remember, you've got your little SIGs, and you've got revolvers, you've got all these handguns, you've got all these options that are tiny. But there's something you got to think about also, and that is, not everybody is going to be comfortable, using one of these smaller firearms as a defensive weapon. Good example, I really love my little P365 Romeo Zero here, the X. And, it's got a good enough little 3-finger grip here to where I feel I could hold the gun solidly and do what I need to do. And this has a little red dot. It's a very functional, very capable firearm. But does that weapon feel as solid in my hand as this one? Well, no. The Glock 19 feels like it's something that I can control a whole lot better, whether it's with one hand or with two. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with a smaller frame pistol. But if I had a choice, if they told me I could only have one, then I would definitely go with the larger pistol, because it's gonna be useful in more areas besides just concealed carry. So one of those reasons why the Glock 19s remain popular, I do believe, is because not only is it the right size for concealed carry, it's on the bigger end, but you got to remember, this is one of the guns that started concealed carry. So the standard of how big a carry gun has been changing, not because anybody asked it to, but just because the development has been getting pistols smaller and smaller. So the Glock 19 is still relevant for concealed carry, but it's perfectly suited for home defense. It's perfectly suited for law enforcement and all kinds of other use. So the Glock 19, after 30 years, is still very relevant. It's still a great choice for pretty much anything you need a firearm to do. And of course, it's almost impossible to beat the reliability and ease of care that you get with owning a Glock. So after 30 years, yes, it's still a great option. All right, well, that's going to do it. We appreciate it. And if you got additional questions or comments, of course, as always, you can leave those for us. We always like hearing from you. And we really appreciate you guys sharing your comments with others, too, to share information. That's what helps make this whole thing work. So we're going to be back soon with another pistol video for you. So until that time, as always, we're just asking everybody to be safe. We can't thank you enough, and we'll be back soon. Have a great day.